hear me, but I can't hear you for the moment. So sorry for the cock up on the timing. We think it's probably a mixture of summertime and wintertime. Because Switzerland, it's 6:30, 6:40, 6:36. So it's still pretty early and it's still dark in Switzerland for the moment. Anyway, talking about road safety, perhaps before we get into the road safety, we'll give you a little update about Nestle just to show you how complex it is.
We will. Andy, what we might do, just for the sake of those who might be first-timers to our webinars, we'll run through a few housekeeping items. So I might hand over to my colleague Jerome Carslick, who actually runs the NRSPP program, and I know he's very excited to be moderating for you all today. So without further ado, over to you, Jerome.
Well, first I've got to say congratulations to the smoothness and recovery of Angela. So thank you to the power of Angela, as Andy pointed out. So
I'm crying on the inside.
But no, what I'd like to say first of all is thank you. Hello, everyone, friends, colleagues who have come along today. What we're really going to be discussing is road safety beyond the gates and the Nestle story. I'm really excited about this. This has been a fantastic and a long-coming sort of webinar I've been putting together. So as you all had an introduction here from Angela, my name is Jerome Carslake and I'll be moderating today's session. I manage the NRSPP, which is a collaborative network established to support Australian business to develop a positive road safety culture. It's about saving lives without red tape. The program provides free networking, support and education to assist organisations in making road safety part of their organisational culture. Basically, it's about bringing best practice, good ideas together exactly like what we're bringing today, and today is a special one because we get an international experience coming in from Andy. So in terms of housekeeping, we're recording today's session. Just checking with Angela.
Yes, we are. We're recording live.
Wonderful. And a copy of the recording together with presentation material will be shared to all of our wonderful listeners after the session's concluded, so please keep an eye out for emails. So just to let you know, a bit of webinars are better, they're interactive, so don't be shy. Shoot through any questions you have that you wish for us to capture, and we will fill them through. So put them through the box here. So what I'd like to do now is, and before I hand over to our presenter, I'd like to introduce him, even though he's done a wonderful job of stepping up to himself at the 6:30 a.m. over in Switzerland. Please welcome Andrew Bradley. He's Head of Group Risk Services at the Nestlé Group and Chairman of the Global Road Safety Partnership. And he's based in Vie Vietnam, Switzerland. It's wonderful skiing there. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Andrew, and he can give some insights into the road safety journey at Nestlé to date. And yeah, Andy, welcome, and please tell us a bit about what you're going to cover today.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the introduction. Perhaps our story, I mean, it's not perfect. We'd like to think that what we did at Nestle was terrific globally. It isn't. We need to be pragmatic. And perhaps just a bit about my background. I'm not from a road safety background. I come from an insurance background, and we kind of got into this topic over the years because we saw that we got so many accidents and injuries on the insurance policies, so we became more and more actively involved over the years. So it's kind of a different angle, perhaps, to most people that come from a SHE background or a fleet background. But enough about me, just a brief history of Nestle, which I hope you guys all know. You used to have some different brands in Australia, like Peter's Ice Cream, which I think we sold a few years ago, but those are the sort of iconic brands that Nestle had or does have. It's nearly 150 years old, which is going to be a massive party on the lawn of head office next year. Hopefully you'll see these brands on the screen there and know most of them. Nescafe, Vittel, San Pellegrino. We're into pet food, we're into ice cream, we're into baby food. We're now moving into more pharmaceutical type products. And you see there in 2011 there's a round circle with some Chinese writing on. This is where we bought into 2 major joint ventures in China, and overnight we added 30,000 employees to our headcount. And I'd just like to imagine the panic in the HR department of adding 30,000 new employees overnight. So if you could just change the slide, that would be great. Yeah, some sales. We can never quite get to the 100 billion in sales, but I guess we'll get there one day. But just to give you a feel for how big Nestle is, nearly 340,000 employees in over 150 countries, 442 factories. An interesting one is at the bottom is the billion Nestle products sold every day. So just imagine the amount of transport issues, vehicle issues involved with that. Okay, next slide. These are the global sales. It's split into 3 regions. As you can see, there's an awful lot of emerging markets there, which are obviously a challenge for us, not only for our own employees, vehicles, but also our contractors. We shouldn't forget in the Western world, I mean, we've got more and more issues with people wanting to communicate constantly, telephones, SMSs, etc., which is, I think, becoming a major issue, certainly in Switzerland. Next one. You guys probably know this already if you're into the road safety arena, that the World Health Organization predicts road injuries is going to be one of the biggest killers by 2020, and particularly in emerging markets. But I think we've got some even more scary figures after this on the next slide. You do a wonderful click there, Angela. Thank you. As you can see, this is a huge figure. I think it's something equivalent to 10 jumbo jets every day crashing. I mean, it's just a horrendous figure, but as we all use the roads, nobody ever thinks about it. Oh, it's never going to happen to me. And we know that it's one of the biggest causes of death for young people between 15 and 29. So, what can we do about it? There's the jumbo jet one. I jumped in before myself there. Just to give you a bit of an overview on the next slide of Nestle's rather complex fleet. As I said, we're in over 100 odd countries. So we have delivery vehicles for water and ice cream, which are their own challenges. We have these ice cream or coffee salesmen, particularly in Thailand and in Indonesia and in South Africa. So we have cars, we have trucks, we have motorbikes and sidecars. And in France, we've even got a motorized sausage, just to give a variety to it. Next slide. So these are some of our challenges. We're a very decentralized company, and we don't really dictate to our countries. We kind of advise or cudgel them. We don't really tell them, look, oh, we've got somebody's birthday today. Okay, that's good. And safety, as you guys probably already know, is a difficult sell, whether it's in the factory or outside, but particularly outside the gates is extremely difficult. We have these massive cultural differences as well throughout the world, where in some cultures it's, well, if it's God's will, we're going to have an accident or not. There doesn't seem to be this concept of, actually, we could probably avoid this if we did certain things. Trying to get quality data around the world is, I think, always going to be a challenge, and I think you can always skew those figures if you're not careful to make them say what you want them to say. So measuring things is a tricky thing. More and more, particularly in the Western world, this thing about data privacy, sometimes I think it goes too far. I think there's only about 3 countries in the world where you can actually look at driver records and link that back into some sort of driver matrix, which is an interesting concept when you think that this could probably add a significant value to road safety for corporates. One of the key things we've found in our experience is leadership from a particular country. If the management of that country really take it on, then it's going to work. If there's no leadership there, it doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to be, it's not going to work properly. Resources and expenses, this is always going to be a challenge. I mean, some of the things we've done, as I mentioned, I come from an insurance background. So we have our own insurance company. It's called a captive insurance company that's 100% owned by Nestle. So we finance a lot of the loss prevention out of this captive, and it's been really useful for us to use that money, because probably the same with you guys, nobody's ever got any money for these things. Oh, I'll do it next year, and this, that, and the other. So we've piloted quite a few things like telematics, which I think we get to later. It's also trying to engage all the stakeholders, because it's not only a health and safety issue, it's logistics, it's HR, it's procurement. There are multiple stakeholders in there, and trying to get everybody online, it's tricky. And I think it's certainly in our culture, one size fits all in the sort of countries that we're in would be extremely difficult. Are there any questions so far before we get into the meaty part? Or how do you want to play that? Do you want questions as we go? Oh, that's good.
Well, look, yeah. I guess here's a good question for you. How does Nestle provide guidance on safety leadership? You sort of mentioned that as a core sort of component. How do you sort of step up to that, especially the diversity across the globe that you must deal with? Because in Australia we have different states, different jurisdictions, different sort of leaderships taking place in different sort of areas. So I think there's quite a strong correlation there.
Yeah, we probably have two things. We have later on in the presentation, there's this 10-point checkpoint, checklist, which we put together some years ago as a roadmap for countries to put in place a road safety program. But we're very good at Nestle in having what we call general instructions, a GI, which is one of these cover your ass things that big companies really like to do, to send out that this is what you're supposed to do, and if you don't follow it, it's your fault. And we're very good at doing that. And they've just issued a new one that sets some guidance, but it's very much left to the individual countries to implement that. We've had a bit of a struggle trying to get accurate data in. They changed the system, and personally I think they went too far in the frequency of asking for data, because nobody likes filling in figures into an Excel spreadsheet or whatever to send into head office. And I think sometimes you can go for overkill on those things, asking for monthly data. So it's kind of wishy-washy. It's really up to each country to do the right thing, and we've got some really superb examples in our company, and we've got some other ones that are really weak. But I guess it's going to be a progressive thing. It's going to take years probably to bring everybody on board, and I think, as we said in the rehearsal, I think you could probably say this in Australia. You know, the famous philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau once said, "If you throw enough shit at the wall, some of it sticks." And I think it's very much in that. In that vein, that you have to keep passing the message, and when you find somebody that really gets the message, to sort of latch onto this person and trying to help them as much as possible in their country to develop a process.
Awesome. And look, if anyone else does have questions, please don't be shy. Again, just into the questions box that you'll find in your control panel. So webinars work best when they're interactive. Don't be shy. If you've got anything to ask Andrew or perhaps Jerome, please send it through. All right, Andy, back to you. What are we covering next?
But this is a bit of an oxymoron. Shyness and Australians, it doesn't really go together, does it?
Sometimes it happens.
Okay. Well, this is our iceberg. As we're going into the winter, we thought we'd show the iceberg costs. But I think iceberg slide. I think sometimes there's just, I say, too much focus on safety. It's become rather a purist topic that it's all about safety. It is, but do we make a good enough business case to sell this? Because you've got the direct costs of road accidents, you've got the insurance premiums, you've got the deductible costs and the own damage, but there's all this stuff underneath that links back into it. You've got your work injuries, you've got your medical costs, the lost time, you've got potential issues of corporate manslaughter, especially in UK, Australia, poor vehicle residuals, damaged goods when the trucks overturn, poor image to the company, staff morale. I mean, all these great things here. And I think the big thing for corporates now is the corporate social responsibility and proving that they're creating shared value in the community. And it's not just a vehicle. There's more to it than that, but trying to get companies on board. And honestly, I think insurance companies have a far bigger role to play in this, but they don't actually realise it yet, to try and make a business case for road safety. And we have, this is our CEO, current CEO, Paul Bulkey, who made this statement, one accident is one too many. So this is basically for factories, but we've kind of stolen this to say, look, if this is good for factories, why shouldn't it be good enough for road safety? But this is what the guy says, but the next slide, it says, but spot the errors. So here we have a salesman with Kit Kat. I mean, just look at, this is like one of these competitions in the newspaper where you can spot the errors. I mean, this guy's got no crash helmet on. I mean, look at the footwear. It's classic, isn't it? And then you look at the boxes on this. I mean, you'd think that the weight distribution is going to make this bike very, very unstable. And this is sometimes the sort of stuff that drives us nuts. We'll have our marketing people send out these wonderful brochures thinking this is a new route to market. We've got some poor Indian guy delivering Kit Kat to some small store, and it's not one of our people, it's a contractor. So then they think, oh, it's a contractor, they can do what they want. And trying to educate within the companies, look, this really isn't acceptable. On one hand, we say we're a responsible company, but then you're letting contractors do this sort of stuff. So it's a continual battle with education, but it's not all bad. The next few slides, we've got some positive examples. So as I was ranting before about contractors, Nestle Philippines did a superb job in trying to pass the message about road safety along to their contract trucking companies. There's about 10 to 12 of these companies they use in the Philippines, and over a period of several years they've managed to treat these companies truly as partners. I mean, Philippines culture seems to work very well like that. If you work for Nestle, you're part of a bigger family, so whatever Nestle does that's good, they try to take it on. And we haven't shown the pictures in here, but there's these before and after slides of what the yards, the drivers' rest areas, cooking facilities used to look like. And they've also helped them develop a program for the vehicles. So there's an educational program. And now the trucking companies think this is great because it's improved their image. It's improved their driver turnover, and obviously, if they want to deal with other companies apart from Nestle, they can go to new companies and say, "Look, we're a professional outfit compared to the locals." So I think this is a great example of a multinational helping to develop or create shared value in the community, pass those best practices on to local companies. Okay. Oh, and then we've got, okay, this is another great one. This is in Africa. Over the last few years, we've had a couple of conferences there, one in Ghana and one in Cameroon. Camerooni one was particularly interesting because it was linked in with the Safeway Right Way, which is an organisation initially sponsored by the World Bank and Total. So in Cameroon, there are, I think, 12 or so companies, some locals, some multinational, that grouped together, including Nestle and Total. And it's not really based on money. It's based on learning, sharing best practices to try and develop a greater road safety culture. And one of the touching things in this conference was we had, again, contract trucking companies at the conference that stood up and thanked Nestle for the help they'd given them, and explaining to us what they did every day with their 2-minute safety talk or check before they went on the road. So that was kind of an interesting development. And this Safeway Right Way has also been developed in other countries, in Kenya, I think in some other African countries. But I think it's kind of a neat way to spread the message. Okay. Vietnam is another great place. As you're probably aware, there's an awful lot of scooters and motorbikes in Vietnam. We have a water company there that has sponsored crash helmets, not only for their employees, but they've done competitions in the public, because it's compulsory to wear a crash helmet in Vietnam, but the problem is a lot of the crash helmets are fake, or they don't meet the right standards. So some of these have been branded. Now, you could ask, is this correct that Nestle brands crash helmets? But it's an interesting insight into how you can help the community by having competitions to provide crash helmets with company logos on. Not only did we do this for a competition for the public, but also we ensured that all our factory workers were given up-to-date helmets. And in some of the Nestle plants, we know they do rider training to make sure that people know how to ride the bike and increase their awareness on safety. And these are the employees, the people that come and go to the factories. These aren't salesmen or people that are on the road for the company. So this is what we've done in some of the emerging markets. The next slide shows what we did the other year. There was we had a road safety week at head office. So every day there was a new event. And then we managed to engage the local police. We engaged some of our, I think 3 or 4 of our insurance connections to provide assistance. We had the car that rolls over, so people have an experience of a rollover in a car. We also had the seatbelt one where you're propelled along a track and then they jam the brakes on to see how that feels. And also in the community, we sponsored this thing for kids on bikes in one of the convention halls, and the police thought this was terrific, and they wanted actually to do more of this work with us in the future. And this model has now been used in other Nestle countries, Spain, Mexico, and a couple of others. So it was kind of an interesting learning curve for all of us. Any more questions to make this a bit more interactive?
I guess you mentioned there's a strong focus on education, particularly the promotional material and sort of your training materials earlier. So I was sort of wondering, how's Nestle gone about sort of, you have different sort of areas where you're approaching things across different sort of countries. How hard has that been in sort of translating material? You have the head office going about creating the material going out, which you mentioned. How does that impact going on the ground in those different countries?
Well, we set these guidelines, what they should do, and then we let the countries interpret that as they want. So, in my personal opinion, we're kind of reinventing the wheel in a lot of countries, but in one hand it's kind of wasteful, but the other hand, if they don't own it, they're not going to do it. And I think it's a bit of a fine balance with decentralised and what's the opposite? And centralised companies. It's getting that balance in what's the right way to do it. I mean, if you look at US companies, they're very centralised. If something comes from head office, they're expected to do it. But do they really own it? Do they really believe it? So I think that's going to be always going to be a bit of a push-pull in the culture of your organisation.
Here's another one we've had come in. I was interested in what was the upfront sort of spend, and how did this translate to an increase in productivity?
Oh, that's a good one. Honestly, I don't know. Because, well, we're at head office and we haven't got all the figures locally, but I think there's also a question of doing the right thing. And just on that front, you know, we often focus on employee drivers. We've just recently found out that in Malaysia, we've had 8 deaths in the last 3 or 4 years of employees going backwards and forwards to work. So these don't actually fall into the figures because in Malaysia, that's not counted as a work injury. And I think sometimes companies tend to forget that area. And I think it's one that they need to focus on as well, is their employees that aren't on the road for the company, but are coming to and from work and in their private lives, especially in countries of high risk.
So I guess that's the commute. I was wondering, what sort of example, like, would you have from a Nestle point of view, what sort of cost there might be in relation to the impact of someone commuting being injured on the way to work at all? Would there be at all?
I guess that's going to be a tricky one, because it depends on the country whether we're providing the medical cover. But I mean, it's just a social impact of an employee being injured or killed. I mean, that only devastates the family, but also the co-workers. And it's this whole sort of productivity thing involved in that, which I think sometimes we don't necessarily think about, but I think we should do. I mean, on a positive side, and I think we mentioned this in the rehearsal the other day, just to change the direction a bit. When we first started out doing these things about 10 years ago, one of the first projects we got involved with was in the United States, where we have a web-based training program that we offer to all the countries in the world if they want to take it up. It's just a building block. It's not going to be one element, in our view, that makes a significant difference. It's the leadership, and then you need various building blocks to make this happen and keep it fresh. But we started off with these great burly truckers in the US, and the guy we worked with there was very, very astute in trying to find truckers that kind of the leaders in the particular warehouses and could influence the other truck drivers. So having got these guys to buy into it and show him the training, and this wasn't at all to judge them in any way. Basically, they sold it on the idea that, look, we want you guys to be safe during your work time, so you go back to your families in one piece. And it was done in such a way that they bought into it. And I mean, you imagine trying to sell this to a burly trucker, and truckers, I guess everywhere, but particularly in the States, there's very much this image of being cowboys, in the sense of cowboys, freedom, the plains, nobody's going to tell me what to do, I'm my own boss. So trying to win these guys over was quite a thing. So we let them look at the web-based material, and they could change some of the questions, so they bought into it. Then the problem was, these guys, a lot of them had never used a laptop in their life, so they were really scared of this stuff. So they had to be trained, and often they did it in groups. They had to be trained in how to use a laptop. I mean, 10 years ago, this is a different world now in the IT area, but these guys, they could go home to their families, and particularly their kids who are probably already into laptops, and say, hey, you know, today I actually used a laptop. So there was really a good feeling about this sort of stuff. And according to our logistics manager, the turnover of drivers reduced quite drastically in that period, because the drivers felt as though we were really taking care of them. So I think there's a lot of soft benefits to the whole road safety if it's done well. It's not just about the accidents, it's that feel-good factor, taking care of your employees, staff retention and all that good stuff. But hard facts, it's a difficult one, but again it goes back to the comment about the iceberg, about we should really build a business case for road safety. It's not just because it's the right thing to do. How can we quantify that to make it businesses buy into it?
And I guess bringing it to a bit of an Australian tangent here now, are you aware of any sort of examples of road safety strategies in the Australian setting at all?
I'm sorry, I missed that one. There was a bit of a blip in the
Are you aware of any road safety strategies from the Australian setting? Just one of the questions that sort of come in, and how that Nestle might have applied here.
Actually, Australia's been it's been a bit of a challenge since we started the program. We tried to provide them with this web-based training tool, and because of the changeover in staff there, in cost cutting, it's never got off the ground. So this was one of the first countries we tried to attack in our empire, and it's still not been fully implemented. The other thing we did in Australia was we sponsored telematics, and that's probably a good topic. I think we've got that a bit later on. And they tested it, but it wasn't very good. Instead of putting it in the right vehicles, I think they put these telematics into salesmen's cars, and at the time I think they drilled through the dashboard, which didn't please very many people because it made an absolute mess of the vehicle. So any strategies? To me, it's the leadership. It's getting the people at the top on board to see the benefit. We got an example in Mexico, but honestly, for us, Australia's been a bit of a struggle. You know, the people drive so much there because of the distances involved, and often it's a question of hours driven, especially with salesmen. I mean, truck drivers, it's probably a little better, but the salesmen, they never see themselves as professional drivers. They just see themselves as salesmen, and it's always the guy with the worst accident record that's the best salesman. So then you get into the argument, well, you know, he's the best guy, we can't take him off the road, we can't train him. And it's this awful conundrum that you get with salespeople.
Yes, and I guess you're looking to try and avoid that they don't take themselves off the road permanently, which is a bit harder for the bosses to realise.
Exactly. But I think that there's a lot of emotion, I think, involved with salesmen. I mean, the big thing at the moment is the communication, isn't it? With even if it's hands-free, distracted driving, and we've just implemented, or trying to implement, and whether it will be enforced is a ban on all phones during driving. And there's some countries are already asking for an exemption because they're special. One of those is a major country on the other side of the Atlantic. I think you can probably imagine which one that one is, who claims that if the salesman can't communicate while they're driving, the sales will plummet. And I think, honestly, it's bullshit. I think it's the same principle as that we used to put children up chimneys. We stopped doing that a long time ago, and we found other ways around it. And I think it's one of these arguments that salespeople use. I think it's all about organisation and planning and being more efficient, rather than salesmen continually being on the phone. Well, that's my personal view.
We tend to agree with that view. Shall I move to the next slide for you, Anne?
Yep. Good stuff. Yeah, this is the 10-point checklist that we put together some years ago, and it's still available. It's a bit of a roadmap for countries to use to put together a road safety program. What's the policy? Getting people to agree, because often you've got an HR policy which you probably have to sign and read, but often companies haven't got a policy on safe driving. To respect the law, not to take drugs, and all this sort of stuff. Something as simple as that to get some sort of a commitment. So there's stuff on there about compliance and risk assessment. Is there a journey management process involved? I think another great one actually is the health and wellness, which is often ignored, because we've seen in a number of countries that some road accidents are linked to health issues. We had one salesman in Thailand, I believe, who was continuing having accidents, and they found out the guy needed glasses. And interesting, a lot of emerging, I think it's Pakistan, we had this issue with contract trucking companies who wouldn't employ drivers with glasses because they said they had poor eyesight. Now just think about that one for a minute. So there's a lot of issues there which we don't tend to link in the wellness issue with the safe driving, about especially long distance truck drivers. They typically have issue. They're often overweight because of the food they eat in truck stops. They often have diabetes and high blood pressure. That's probably a separate webinar in its own right, actually. Health and wellness for drivers. We're probably going ahead of ourselves in that one, but I think it's a topic potentially to be discussed in the future. There's the other one there on eco driving, because I think you can make a superb argument, especially with your telematics, to save money. If people drive in the right way, not only can they reduce accidents, but they can save up to 7% on fuel. If you've got a big fleet, that's an awful lot of money, but it takes quite a lot of effort with the telematics, and perhaps we'll get to that in a minute. I think on the next slide, it shows some of the things that we've done or sponsored because we've got this captive insurance company. So when countries have implemented their road safety program, we typically offered them a gap analysis, which has been done by the Zurich Insurance for us after 2 or 3 years, just to keep it fresh and see how they can improve. Now, not all countries have done this. I think they've done about 6 or 7 of these around the world. The Virtual Risk Manager is a web-based training tool, which I said, it's a bit like a Lego building block. You need various tools to help the countries evolve and use and keep things fresh, but I don't think there's any one element to there that really is critical. Telematics, we've got a slide on that in a minute, but that's a great tool, but it's not a panacea for all your problems. And it concerns me at the moment because some insurance companies have got into this and they're selling this as the next best thing since sliced bread. It could be, but it depends how you implement it. I think the communication and the training material is good. The benchmarking, I think, is a very good tool, because if you've got, so you can compare with other companies. In our company, for many, many years, because we're Swiss, we were kind of very discreet and wouldn't share information. But now we sort of benchmark everything, and our management like that. If we can show them that we're falling behind other countries, that's quite a good motivator, actually, to give them a kick up the backside to try and do something. And I'd really encourage you guys in Australia to try and form some sort of benchmarking or network. I don't know whether you're familiar with an organisation in the States called NETS, N-E-T-S. I think it's probably 60 or 70 major organisations there, and they do benchmarking. It's very interesting. I mean, whether you could copy something like that in Australia, I think that would be terrific.
We've been actually trying to do that. We've established a utilities forum. We're actually a whole lot of utility companies across the power, the telcos, electricity, gas level. Doing that through an SPP, so yeah, it's had incredible effect on that. And it's just the one thing on the bottom there, Arrive Alive, the company that helped us do the Virtual Risk Manager. It's like it's a game you can do, and it's been quite popular. We did it in the Philippines. We also did it on our Road Safety Day. It's like, well, fun. I mean, I suppose it is fun. It's a lighter way to try and pass the road safety message, and you can get a prize if you get all the questions right. So it's just thinking of new ideas to keep things fresh and keep passing the message.
Okay. Has anybody fallen asleep yet? Are they still there? Oh, I see we've still got some people there. This is excellent.
We do.
Okay.
Haven't heard anyone snoring yet, so hopefully no one will start now.
Okay. Now, telematics. We piloted this probably 10 years ago. We did it in Poland with our water business. Very interesting process. We were measuring the harsh braking, acceleration, turning. We wanted seatbelt use, but at that time I don't think it was in the technology. Speeding, but some of the interesting things that came out, these were allegedly professional drivers, and these guys hadn't realised they were putting the vehicle into neutral going downhill, thinking they were saving fuel. They were also letting the vehicle run when they should have been stopping it, so that the waste in fuel was enormous. So there's really good learnings. The only down the telematics is the information has to be managed, and that is a bit the downside of it. The initial fleet managers were in Poland. They thought this was great, and you can get a bit of a competition going with your drivers. Well, how did you get to this level of fuel economy? And that was quite an interesting human experience to see that. But then the fleet managers changed, new ones came in, cost pressure, they hadn't got the time to check the information. So unless you're going to ensure that somebody looks at this data, manages it, and gives feedback to the drivers, it's going to fall apart. And also with the technology, it moves constantly. And there are a lot of flaky companies out there with telematics. There are so many, and we've had an experience within Nestle where we've spent an awful lot of money and the system hasn't worked properly. It's a great tool, and you can really, typically this stuff, it pays for itself in less than 9 months. So it's really effective, and then you can link your safety to your eco driving, reducing your CO2, but just be careful when you do it that somebody manages the data. This is Mexico. I don't know if any of you ever been to Mexico and seen how they drive there, but it's kind of a long story, but we had a bit of a falling out with Nestle Mexico over some insurance premiums, and they went off in a huff and did their own thing, and we went off in a huff in the other way, and then we said, you know what, let's have a kiss and a cuddle and make up. Let's see if we don't want your insurance because we think it's awful, but let's see if we can help you develop a safe driving concept. So we provided them with the web-based training tool. We had an organisation that was good at collecting. So I'm not going around in the circle in the right way, am I? So we started off with the web-based training tool. One of the local insurance companies was prepared to offer courses in defensive driving. They put in place a one-to-one ride-along process, and they had accurate data, statistics on the losses, which helped them manage what was going on. And the key thing with this one is the leadership as to why it really works. We're really quite proud of this, because to reduce accident frequency in Mexico, we think was pretty good. So the next slide. So this is some of the communication tools that they use, and they posted this all around the company and the factories and everywhere. And we even extended it to some of the contract van delivery companies, and they also linked it in with their health and wellness program, because each year they already had an annual checkup, and they kind of linked the two things together, as we mentioned before about the eye tests and particularly on the diabetes. So that's the communication part. The next one, they had the golden rules as to what they should and shouldn't do, and everybody signed up to this to say they understood what they were supposed to do, trying to pass the message. Another interesting one on the next page is actually the selection of vehicles. They had these Nissans, as you can see, they didn't have ABS, they weren't very efficient, and they didn't have the enough, the safety scores, the stars. So they kind of moved to these new vehicles as well, which was an interesting one. Because often in large companies, procurement have something to say about various costs, and if you're not careful, the cost element can overweigh the security elements. I mean, I'm rather ashamed to say that in one country we had procurement say that they should hire hire cars that had no airbags because they were cheaper. I mean, it was just absolutely ridiculous. And people think sometimes they're doing a great job in saving money without thinking of the safety aspects. So with all these great things they did, if we move on to the next slide, we'll see how successful it was. So from 2010 to 2013, you can see the number of people injured reduced drastically, but the accident frequency was the one that was absolutely incredible, how that went down. So even in a place like Mexico, you can actually make it work as long as you're sending the right message and people buy into it. And there's probably 4 or 5 of the key messages on the next slide as to why this really worked were: it's a strong management commitment. The web-based training tool was a cornerstone of the program. It's not the only reason, but it was a nice tool to use. I think that they did a really good communication plan, and they got the drivers to buy into it, and it was really proactively followed up. So it wasn't just a one-off. It's trying to keep these things fresh and managed and up to date over a period of time to get people's buy-in. Just got any questions after those bits?
There's one question actually relating back to the telematics, I guess. It was just sort of saying, I think you touched on them when you're making a point about the monitoring the data and those parts, but what are really a couple of just the key take-home messages you would give an organisation when they're looking at implementing a telematics solution in their organisation?
It does work. I think getting the right service provider, one you can work with, one that's flexible, and one that can do what he says he can do. Because there's so many service providers out there, and I'll tell you, some of them are flaky. And as we've said before, management needs to understand that just putting a black box in a vehicle isn't the answer. You need to actually analyse the data and work on that. And somebody has to look at that and give the feedback to the driver. If you're not prepared to do that, don't even bother going there. And I think the foundations of your road safety program it shouldn't just be based on telematics. There needs to be probably an embryonic culture that's been established there. It's not the black box that's going to change everything. It's a great tool to lead you down a successful path. But I think you need to try and embrace the road safety culture even before you get to the black box.
And I guess another sort of question is relating to the quality of the vehicles in Mexico when you went from lower to a higher standard sort of vehicle.
Yeah.
In addition to the safety benefits, have you found any other sort of flow-on benefits from moving to those sort of vehicles as well?
Well, typically the vehicles are more efficient. People generally like newer vehicles, but in a lot of the emerging markets, major motor manufacturers, they're still producing vehicles that are probably 10 years out of date compared to what we get in Europe. And we had a massive discussion with Renault in Brazil because we wanted to purchase their small vans, but they hadn't got a certain level of safety equipment, and it was a massive argument with them to try and put it on. Eventually they sorted it. But I think that's one of the disparities in the world, is that emerging markets, because of cost constraints, often get vehicles that aren't up to standard compared to what we've got. So it's always related to cost.
Does Nestle globally have a policy on the vehicle, like the standard or the star rating of vehicles?
We do now. We have one on the star rating, but as I said, in some countries it doesn't work, and we know particularly in commercial vehicles, they're still sold in many emerging markets without seatbelts. So I mean, we're talking exotic places now. We're not talking about Queensland or anything like that. We're talking Pakistan and Bangladesh and places like that. These can often be a challenge trying to get vehicles with the right equipment. And then you'll get the excuse, it's too sophisticated for our market. Nobody knows how to repair it and stuff like this. It's all good excuses. It's going back to putting kids up chimneys philosophy, which we kind of need to break down over a period of time.
And how do you manage the perception of consequences when staff are recorded to be driving dangerously?
I think that's going to vary from country to country. They're getting stricter and stricter. I mean, we know the ice cream company in the States, they're very strict about telephone use, and you're not supposed to answer the telephone when you're in the truck. And if you're caught on the telephone, it's an immediate sacking offence. But that isn't the same all around the world. I mean, we are a decentralised organisation, so we do have such a variety of things that go on in our company. There isn't any standard, but I think the tougher you are, I mean, it sends a clearer message. And if you've got a level playing field, and I think sometimes it has to come from the top, that the bosses at the top need to walk the talk as well. It's not just one rule for everybody else. I mean, they should be seen to be wearing seatbelts, even if in the back of a taxi or in the chauffeur limo. These are the sorts of messages I think should be passed down from the top.
Is that an expectation that Nestle has across all your leadership areas as well?
No. So we're kind of decent. I think this isn't going to be sent back to our bosses at Nestle, but I'm just being very honest with you that, you know, we are a big company. We'd like it to be all the same, but it isn't. I mean, there are some really good countries out there and some where we could improve drastically. Having said that, there's these statements that were made. We signed up to the Global Road Safety Partnership a few years ago to make a clear statement that we were committed to improve road safety globally, which we are trying to do, but it's a long road. You can probably pass on to the next slide. Yeah, I think that's very much the same thing, really. The next one might be quite interesting for you, actually. It's you were saying how much did we save on the next slide? So this shows our insurance. We have a global insurance program where it's 40 odd countries for our fleet, and there you can see that there's this graph that's going down. So it's going in the right direction related to the frequency of claims, which started off in 2004 49%. It's now dropped to 13%, and the average cost per vehicle. So we must be doing something right, because the graph is going down in the right direction. The blip in 2010 was because we put Mexico in there, and that's what caused the problem, and that's when we had this falling out with Mexico. So if you do it right, yes, you can save money. And going back to the iceberg chart, it depends on what factor you use. I think British Telecom used a factor of 3 to suggest that direct costs, total costs, equal 3 times direct costs. Other companies use a bigger factor of 5 or 10, but I think 3 is probably very conservative. But I think it's probably very realistic to go back to your management to say, if we're losing $1,000 here, actually the total cost is more like 3,000. So that's kind of like a rule of thumb that's been applied. So as you can see, if you do it right, you can actually save money, and this is just on the insurance costs, not on all the other stuff.
How did you kick off the journey at the very beginning at Nestle? How did you, because you said to get buy-in at the top, how did you start that journey to get Nestle?
Well, again, we're a very strange company. We don't tend to get buy-in at the top. We tend to find pilots that work, and then we go back after we've found things that work, go back to the good and the great and say, look, you know what, this works. But it's also getting buy-in from the stakeholders in the particular countries, the businesses, health and safety, procurement, logistics. So it is kind of a journey, and it really takes time to develop those relationships and do a sell inside. It's all about communication and being persistent, because you know, you get many doors that are shut in your face, and if you don't keep on, it'll never happen.
So how do you actually sustain that culture? How do you keep communication, but how do yourself, how do people working in that continue that momentum forward?
Well, you know what we said about Jean-Jacques Rousseau again? It's the same principle. It's trying to get great examples of what's happened out there, and that's something we're not very good at. I mean, when we travel to various countries, we take a look at what's going on in the road safety area. Those examples, bring them back, put them on the websites, pass them around. We've also had a road safety award, which we're going to do next year, because I think it's good. Often road safety is the poor relation, because I think personally, I think it's probably far too much emphasis on factories and not enough on the roads. And I think if we can highlight that, because there's an awful lot of great work going on out there, but it's not highlighted, it's not recognised. So I think we're trying to push the concept of having more frequent awards for road safety to pass that message that it is valuable and it should be recognised.
Here's a great question that's just come through from Tony, and it's a hot topic, I think, that sort of pops around in the road safety sphere. Some road authorities in various states around Australia use shock tactics in their awareness and education campaigns for road safety. Has Nestle ever considered this approach for different regions? If so, what are some examples?
Interesting one. They do tend to do shock horror ones in Vietnam. We've seen there. They've had films in their factories and in the canteen. Can you imagine this? You're having your lunch and you've got it's, it can be a bit gruesome, I think. But perhaps it's a cultural thing. But I think you need to be careful of that. There's one famous example years ago. I think it was in the 60s or 50s when people realised that smoking caused cancer, and there was some famous actor that was dying of cancer, and there's this very emotional speech that was given in this advert. And they found out that cigarette sales actually went up when people were watching the advert, because it was like, oh shit, this is terrible, it's never going to happen to me. So I think it's horses for courses, I think. I'm not quite sure whether sometimes the shock horror stuff really works, because you think, this is never going to happen to me. I don't know, it's a tricky one. You'd have to probably see some industrial psychologist to ask that question. But because we've got such a diverse culture and in so many countries, we probably have to adapt that to each country, and I don't think one size isn't going to fit all, I think. And also in some countries, they really like the fact that the company gets involved in their private life. You try doing that in Switzerland, people get very antsy about it. What's it got to do with the company? You did it in Asia, it's kind of expected that the company takes more of a paternal view on its employees. Well, I certainly haven't got all the answers. This is just our view, our experiences, and we know our company is certainly not perfect. But I think you have to start somewhere and keep on trucking, as they say.
No, I think thank you very. And this is a textbook example, I think, of the opportunity for sharing and people contributing their knowledge like you have just done now, Andy. So thank you very much for the opportunity to come in and present and talk about the journey that it is at Nestle.
Yeah, that's a pleasure. That's very good. Thank you for the opportunity to get up extremely early and watch the sun and watch the sunrise. It's fantastic at the moment. Mickey's sitting next to me. He's been listening to all this, and we've been watching the sun come up. So it's almost been romantic. We might have a moment in a minute, me and Mickey, actually.
We've had quite a few thank you messages come through from our audience as well. So thank you guys so much for staying on the line. Sorry about our slightly delayed start time, but we certainly hope we made up for it with some interesting content there. So again, thank you, Andrew and team at Nestle, for joining us at this ungodly hour, and we hope to hear from you again in future. So on that fine note, I might let all of our fellow Australian attendees go home for the day and let you guys start yours. Thanks very much.
And thank you very much for your clicking ability, Angela. You did very well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, see you then. Bye-bye.